I'm Brendan, compulsive overeater, and thanks for uh, being invited here to share with you. I haven't been on this meeting, on this online meeting before, and yeah, I do the things we all do. I weigh and measure my food. I write them down and hand them over to my sponsor. Don't eat anything else in between. Eat those meals no matter what. And abstinence is, major priority in my life. I think it's hard to sort of say because sometimes when I say it's the number one thing in my life, um, but it is a real grounding. Um, I would say the number one thing in my life is maintaining my relationship with my higher power, and everything else kind of flows from that. I'm in numerous recovery programs. This was about the third that I got to. There was a time when I was juggling, trying to give up smoking and trying to deal with the food and, other things that I was dealing with at the time. And eventually I, I'm trying to do things for a while. I was never monstrously, like in sort of in my terms like that. I was never at a weight that I thought, I mean, I really have to lose weight. And people were telling me that I was sort of overweight, but I was carrying much more weight than I needed. And it was starting to put a strain on my back. It was starting to impede my sort of sense of well-being. And I just, I wanted to be healthy. And I was working these other programs. I was first came into Alcoholics Anonymous, and I've sort of dealt with that, and I've dealt with substances, and I've dealt with other things. So I'm dealing with all these things. And I had this sense that if I didn't deal with the food, it was going to be the Achilles heel that was going to take me back out everywhere else. It was just going to erode away at my sense of real sobriety. And that was just bugging me. It was there in the background. It was like, And I'd been doing things. I'd gone on diets. I'd done on cleanses, and I'd sort of get down to a sort of a weight that I thought was, fairly good. And then I go home and visit my mother back in Ireland, and I get back there and all those sort of things that she would make and all those sort of things you were there and, Irish stuff, it's not like sort of, our cuisine has never been reputed up there with the French or the Peruvian, but it has a sort of it has its own thing, like, I mean, sort of, especially I think, in and around the fats, it's sort of like for that winter sort of boost, yeah. And so I would go down and then I go back up again. And after about 4 years of this, I don't know where I heard it, but I heard somebody sort of saying that like, or I read it somewhere that, going up and down is worse than just staying wherever you are. I mean, either stay up or stay down, but don't be going up and down, up and down. I mean, you're really sort of putting pressure on your body. Yeah? And so I was at a gratitude day in a different fellowship, and there was a person there from England, and he was there, and he had this. When we went out to lunch, he was doing this incredibly insane process of weighing and measuring his food. And I was looking at this guy and thinking, this guy's just neurosis at a level like that's just not allowable. And like, I am never doing that. Like, there is no hope I'm ever doing that. Yeah? And about 6 months later, I met him at another place, and I said, "Would you ever show me what you're doing?" Huh? And you know, if I hadn't been in other programs previously, that would probably have been a disaster because I very soon started to call him my sponsor from hell. And I was telling people I had this fellow, I mean, it was like, I mean, what it's like. You just think, all right, so you've got the GreySheeters. Okay, so I'm just going to eat off that, and I'm not going to do that. Okay, yeah, and I'm doing that. But like, there just seem to be so many potholes. And, I was going along and I was going great. And the next things I'm telling him, yeah, I was out and had this really nice meal. And, and I had this, this chili sauce. And he said, was there oil in it? And I said, yeah. I said, did you weigh it? No. You're back to zero. And it was like snakes and ladders, it's like you can't get there. I mean, you just constantly sort of, and I'm a kind of traveling guy, and I worked in strange places. So I'm down on a hill in Yunnan in China, weighing my food in with these indigenous people on a mud floor. And then I'm racing down the hill trying to get coverage on a phone to see if I can get through to my sponsor to call him in on time because he's told me I got to call him on time. And then I'm wondering, am I going to find anything green that actually is on the bloody grey sheet? What am I going to do? And I'm out in the outback in Australia, surrounded with all these Aborigines and like sort of these guys like that look like Crocodile Dundee, and they're all out there and they're all this sort of things. And I'm out here like over some barbecue trying to weigh and measure my food. And I'm supposed to be running a workshop, and I can't do damn well anything because the only thing I'm trying to do is to get my head like so to say. Because if I lose my, oh, geez, it was kind of frustrating. And I was going through all this, but I was determined, and I was determined. And it went on, and my sponsor said to me like I was to get 90 days back-to-back abstinence before he started doing the steps. And I know steps work, so I really want to do steps works, but I'm almost 9 months. It took me 9 months to get the back-to-back abstinence, and he's got me on this reduction diet, like sort of the whole 9 months. So I've gone from being up here to like sort of, people are thinking, do I have some terminal disease? And like, my doctor is sort of saying, you have trouble. And I'm ringing him up and saying, look, like this is my doctor saying this is crazy. Like sort of this guy, he says, will you trust me? And I'm going, oh, bloody hell, what am I going to do? Like everybody says this thing, but I've got no choice, and of course, as I say, like, I hate the guy. And he's in a different country. And I'm thinking, that's really a good idea because if I met up, I don't know what had happened. The first thing he told me to do when I first met him is he said, shut up. And like the people who were with me thought I was going to hit him because like he's English ex-army and I'm Irish, you don't tell me to shut up. Like I said, what's going on here? Yeah? What I did realize was he was telling the voices in my head to shut up. He was telling the voices in my head to shut up. And I had this guy, and people were saying to me, why don't you get a more congenial sponsor? And I've been through the steps in another program. And I thought, like, what? I'm going to have to do this sometime. I've got to do it. So there's no point looking for an easier, softer way. I'm just going to have to do it. And I got it. And I went through with him and through this thing, whatever. And that was 17 years ago. And, he is one of my greatest friends. He's like another grandfather to my son. I think he's wacko some of the time, and he thinks I'm wacko. And actually, we were driving around recently together, and he says, it's really interesting. We have completely nothing in common, except we've got this program. Yeah. And when I was here in Ireland, I was a loner. There was literally nobody here, I think, when I was doing it. There had been a woman, and she had sort of stopped at the time. And then I moved to Australia, and at that time there was nobody in Australia that was on it. There was somebody off somewhere there, but there was nobody who was kind of following sort of this thing. So I've been a loner like most of the time. And when I got to Australia, I remember I'm there and I'm in various other programs, and I'm going to two of these other programs, but they're really kind of wobbly. And, it's kind of, I would have called it like sort of frontier recovery. Yeah. It was, they've got some of the material, but they're not really hooked in with sort of these things. And so what I had my food program. And when I had my 3 weighed and measured meals a day, that was my stabilizing thing. The other things were, like sort of this thing, I didn't feel like I had all the backup, but I can do this with my sponsor on my own anywhere. And I'm getting ready to, I go quite a lot to strange places, and I've been over the last few years, I've been spending a lot of time in the Amazon, and I'm about to go into the Amazon again, and I've got a trip that will go on for about 2.5 months. And some of that, like, I'll be in places where there are no shops. There are no shops, there are no sort of this is whatever sort of thing, and so I have to be well prepared. And it's taken time, and I've done, and I'm here now, and it'll be a month or so before I'm actually, going down into the jungle. But I am planning. What will I do? How will I make it? And what's really interesting, I'll be down in the middle of the jungle in this big old house, these Moluccas, the traditional indigenous houses in the Moluccas. And they'd be saying, Brendan, are you still weighing and measuring your food? And I'd say, yes. And I'd get out my scales and I'd put them on the table, and I'd bring plenty of wheat germ with me, and I'd bring down the Adame beans. Because Because I mean, if I go down there, the amount of protein that I need for a meal is like the amount of protein they have for the family for the meal, you know? See, thank you, Anna. So you can't go in and sort of put a pressure on them. You've got to sort of, you got to do it. But and it's difficult. I was doing a chair recently, and I was showing some photographs, and there's a photograph where they're having this special meeting that they had, and they came and they were dancing, and then they brought some food to me in this big basin, and I can't eat that food. And of course, to all the people, this was an insult. Like, they can't do the food. Now, I've been going so often now that I hope that they've sort of got to know it. But this is something I can't eat that food. Yeah. And so I have to, I have to be able to sort of be strong. One of the great things about this is, and this is probably one of the greatest gifts of recovery, is go and eat in public. Go and eat in public. Get out there and you get your tissues, and do it someplace where they've never seen this stuff before. Like, this is really sort of thing. So I'm in China, and I'm in China, and I'm sitting in this, like, and I've told them before I come, I said, listen, can you get me a place with a kitchen? So I get there and say, no kitchen. But I tell you what, like, you can go to this restaurant. We've told them to prepare your food for you. So I'm in this Chinese restaurant. Nobody speaks English. I don't speak any Chinese, but we've got this deal going, and they've got this fridge, and they've got a whole load of Tupperwares full of my food. And they're doing this stuff for me, you see. So one day I'm there, and I've got my stuff, and I'm weighing and measuring. And the next thing I realize, there's 5 chefs who've come out of the kitchen, and they're standing around my table going, oh, like, what he's doing. And I'm going, yep, like, here I am. I'm the crazy gaijin, I'm the sort of thing, so this like sort of thing. And the next time they came back, I was in the university, and they fixed me up in one of the laboratories in the university with my own little cooker, And I was there, and I'm cooking away, and I'm doing my fish, and I'm doing all this thing, whatever. So a while later, I'm at a conference somewhere, and these people said to me, oh, she says, you have a great reputation in that university. They've never forgotten you. And I'm thinking, oh, this is great. Like, I mean, I've really had an influence. And they said, yes, they can't get over the smell of the cooking. And it's just, it's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure. And there's another story I love to share. It's like I went to a meeting in Germany, and afterwards they have us all down at a restaurant. We're all there together, and there's a few people there with it, and there's a few women from the conference group, and we're all sitting there, and I've got the cup out, and I'm jamming food into the cup, and I'm doing all this thing, whatever. And the girl beside me, she says, "Can I take a photo?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, but why?" She said, "My family think I'm crazy." But they've never seen anything like this. Yeah, they've never seen anything like this. What is interesting is that, like, in many of these places, I traveled in Japan, and they gave me a young person to travel with me. He had a food things. You go into restaurants, they don't mind. There's so many people who are doing so many different things on food. Just take a look at the amount of different things they will offer you on flights in different places. What different? Do you want it gluten-free? Do you want this? Do you want that? Do you want the other? And I do this because this is great. My mother, when I first started this, and I'd come and I'd visit, and she'd say, "Oh, Brendan, we must go out for dinner. We must go out for dinner." And then she'd remember the weighing scales. And she'd say, "Oh, but we could eat at home." Yeah. But with time, all my family got to the stage of, like, it's just what you do. And I'm in a lot of programs, and I have quite a few years sober in many of these. But the one that my family really, really could see was my food program. You can tell them you're 25 years sober in AA. They don't know what an alcoholic is. Just like, my uncle told my father he was an alcoholic, and my father said, but you can drink wine. Yeah. So, like, they don't know what it is. But they saw me, who was a complete rebel, who was like ADHD to the nines, would not follow any directions that anybody ever gave them, weighing and measuring 3 meals a day. And they started to respect that consistency. And that was one of the healing things in the healing with my family. So this program has given me so much more than just a weight that I'm comfortable with. Thanks for letting me share.